This is Henry Sanders, the CEO of Madison 365 and 365 Media. We are here for our lasting impact coverage of covering topics around COVID and figuring out where we were 2 years ago, but the lasting impact of COVID and where we are today. And I have three esteemed guests who are, these are my family, and I'm glad they said yes to joining us. And I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I'm going to enjoy the conversation. Let me let them introduce themselves. Why don't you start with you, Dr. Patricia?
Hola, this is Patricia Tellez Girón. I'm a physician with the Department of Family Medicine and Community Health and the co-chair of the Latino Health Council.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Mr. Dan Brown, sir. Was looking younger every day. This younger.
So you flatter, my man. So yeah, I'm Daniel Brown. My Ho-Chunk name is Wangshik Pinga. That literally means a good person. I'm the executive manager here at Ho-Chunk Gaming Madison, and just want to say thank you for having me on the show today.
Thank you for joining us. I love that. Good person. How do you get your names? Like your parents decide that, or how does that work? I'm just curious.
Yeah, so it's in a ceremony. I'm part of the Native American Church. We have two essentially divisions of traditional people in our Native American Church. And so my Choka, my grandfather, named me. And that's kind of how names are kind of recycled in our culture. I've not met the other Wangshik Ping, but I'm sure he's out there somewhere.
That's awesome. My name is recycled. I'm Henry Jr., so my name is recycled. And Dr. Jenkins, sir, please introduce yourself.
Yeah, Carlton Jenkins, Superintendent of Madison Metropolitan School District. Very proud, very excited to be here today and have this conversation. I appreciate the fact that you continue to keep our community informed of what's going on with us, and we need to be able to do this. And so looking forward to sharing the stage with two wonderful individuals. And I am also looking forward to you sharing the information about the land acknowledgement too today.
Well, let's jump right into it. That's a good way to start this. Tell us a little bit about the land acknowledgement that the school district's done with Ho-Chunk Nation.
Okay, yeah, it was really amazing in Madison Metropolitan School District. Something that we try to do, we try to lift our students' voices. So we had two students, Marina Fox, a student that attends East, and we had Isabella Saiz, who attends West, and they came forth, and I attend the Title VI meetings dealing with our Indigenous students and families, and they talked about not seeing themselves in the curriculum in the schools, any murals on the walls, things of that nature. And they wanted to get something small so it can acknowledge our Indigenous students. And so, we just simply said, why small? If you're going to do it, let's just do it all the way. And they said, what do you mean? Well, because they were prepared to fundraise to get a small plaque. And I said, we just passed a referendum. We're talking about it's for all students. And we all need to know about what happened with our Indigenous nations, the 11 nations, what took place here on this land. Decho, the 4 lakes, and this being Ho-Chunk land. This is ancestral land. Let's do an acknowledgement. So all of our schools now are going to have plaques on them explaining the legacy of this land. And our students will be represented every time they walk into a building now. That plaque is on the outside. And I mean, it's a huge plaque. Like if you go over to UW and you see some of those plaques, it's recognizing that this land belonged to the 11 nations and that it's ancestral land. And we want our students to know when we say belonging, lifting your voice, we mean it. And so the board unanimously supported it. The staff, the community came out for a big land acknowledgement a couple of weeks ago. And we're excited as a pig in slop to have this in our community. But this is just the beginning, as it's statutorily expected that we do teach, but it hasn't been done, right, at a level that it should be. But we're committing in our district to make sure that all of our students are being seen in our community. And so that's why even when I acknowledge myself, I would say he, him, his, to recognize my pronouns. And so we're just very proud of this fact and happy to be partnering with Ho-Chunk and other Indigenous groups too as well, but particularly Ho-Chunk because this is the land.
what I love about that is one that was an East student who said that, because I know I'm a Pergolder, so I'm always championing my East Side high schoolers. But two, I have to say this, that a Black man as being a Black superintendent is sometimes, I think people think we are in our own silos and worry about our own community. And I love that you are looking at a bigger sense of community, and you're looking at a bigger sense of history and acknowledging that history. So I think that's powerful. And I think that should be a national model of what you're doing. And so, I mean, I don't know, Dan, what do you think? You think that's to me, that's a big deal. You know what I mean? Is that something that's significant to you?
Oh, it's huge and I just want to thank, Dr. Jenkins, these kind of sentiments and these actions are invaluable. I'm always humbled to hear this, and it's not always very, perfectly received by some of our tribal membership. I hear some criticism out there of tokenism and that sort of thing. And I disagree completely with that. When UW raised the Ho-Chunk Nation's flag at Bascom Hill last spring or last fall. Anyway, that's huge. These gestures are very significant. And for me, each time somebody does this, each time an organization, does something like this, it's moving the needle. And what it does also, it provides for that sort of awareness, right? We've been so invisible for so long as Ho-Chunk people, and that's largely by choice because of federal policy that really, endangered us, endangered our language, endangered our culture. And so, the whole idea was to eliminate us, from the face of the earth. And these kind of things are, to me, I'm so humbled and so thankful, thankful. And Henry, to your point, it is profound. It's a big deal. And should it be something that's, that inspires the rest of the country? I absolutely believe so. But being a little bit of a little ethnocentric, and a Ho-Chunk, a proud Ho-Chunk, just want to say thank you. And it's a really, really big deal. And I love, by the way, this panel, not to suggest that being in an environment of just, or a space of only non people not of color. I love this. I love this setup right now. Just want to say that much too. Thanks.
Yeah. And go ahead, Dr. Jenkins.
No, I was just saying you're so welcome, and it really is serious. And like when you think about Chief Seattle, right, and the statement that he made years ago about we're a world web of basically people, and whatever you do to one, you're doing it to yourself. And so to me, and I get it, tokenism, people talking about, we have our first Black superintendent. Well, I hope that I'm more than a Black superintendent. I hope I'm a superintendent who happens to be Black, and my credentials can go up against anyone else's, right, in the world. And when I look at this, and both of you doctors, just being here, and I came in talking about correcting historical wrongs for Black and brown people, special needs people, poor people, and to have a panel sitting looking like this is beautiful. And I hope that the conversation and how we've been impacted by COVID gives us an opportunity to weigh in. I am one who pushed on a national level that the intelligence in our ability to articulate where we're coming from, our own narrative, is much better than someone else giving a narrative about us, because you don't really know.
And, the thing about tokenism is, it's, building one brick at a time, though, right? You have to build one brick at a time. And so hopefully you get people, we're always have naysayers what you're doing, but the point is the work is being done, right? The work is being done. And so that's a blessing. Again, I don't know anyone else nationally who's done that kind of thing. So that's to me, that's fabulous. So, Doctor, these men have been on this, they're doing all the talking. You see what I'm saying? I get it. I just want you to know, I know, like, they're just taking up the whole
She's in charge. She's the smartest one on here.
She totally
She is.
We
We know that. We got our words out. Now it's her turn. Give it up.
It was very, very, very important, talk. So that's why I listen carefully, because I think it's wonderful. I agree with Dr. Brown that this is huge, not only for his population, but for all of the populations to start being seen. It is huge.
Yeah, and before we got online, so just to reinforce what the Dr. Jenkins just said, she is the boss. She did say you should start with that question, and so we started with the question. So just so you know who's running the show here. He was not joking. Okay, so let's start with a lot of times as leaders, I've noticed, I must have talked to a lot of leaders, is that when we talk about COVID and we talk about the things that happened in the past 2 years, when we talk to them, we talk about, how the community is doing, how their organization doing, how their business doing. But I think leaders really rarely have someone say, wait a minute, stop, time out. How are you doing as a leader? How are you doing through COVID? How has it impacted you? How are you doing? And so I want to start with that question, just as an individual, not all the wonderful things you're doing, not the wonderful people you're impacting and all that stuff, but just how are you doing? So why don't we start with the boss here? And boss, how are you doing?
I am doing very well, thanks to having a huge team of people working with us. And, when I reflect back as a physician, obviously things had to change so quickly. I remember I love working with the team that I work at WINGRA and at my department, because it was in less than a week that we had to change everything we were doing to be able to provide care for other people. And it was just amazing to see how we reorganize. You have to think about, we start with a population, doctors, that we were already burned out even before COVID, because we have been working so hard. And then COVID hits and we didn't have time to feel sorry about ourselves. We knew we needed to provide for our communities. And particularly for me, being from a community of color, I needed to start worrying about my community right away, because I knew it was going to hit really hard. So while I started hearing others say, oh, this is wonderful, I'm going to have time off, I have all this time in my hands, I'm working from home, I'm gardening, I have time now to drink coffee. For me, it was like, wow, my work just tripled as soon as we heard of COVID, right? However, I have been someone that always thinks of me first to be able to provide for others. So I also knew that I needed to protect myself and my family if I was going to be able to continue providing for others, right? And not only physically, but mentally, and how to prepare for that, right? So I started doing a lot of breathing and a lot of meditation and being grateful for every day. And more that I heard of this virus, and I was scared too, as everybody else, because it was something new. But I started considering, how could I help others to help me? And it was very evident with this that whatever was happening everywhere else in the world was going to influence us, right? So the concept of them and us was not there from the beginning for me. This was about everyone. And it was not just about me, it was about everyone in the community. So I think when you are centered from the beginning, that's what it's going to be, and that you just need to keep on going. You need to provide for other people, take care of yourself, but start taking care of others. I think it's doable. And here we are, 2.5 years. I just this morning did another radio program informing the community about COVID. We have been doing 3 to 4 radio programs a month. We have been doing panels. We have been doing a lot of activities. But just to know that our communities are protected keeps me going. And obviously, again, the great team that we have, my family has been amazing on helping us. My mom is taking calls from our home to be able to help people to get the vaccine. It is just a joy just to see how, if we all work together for a purpose, we can do it. I just really wish that the rest of the nation and the rest of the world will understand that if human beings work together, we are better off than if we just want to be against each other.
I love that. I think that's true. And I love that you had said family. Did you say your mom was answering phones? Did you say that?
Yes. So the phone number that we give at the community for anything you need, but particularly right now to sign now for the vaccine, is our home number. So they can call here anytime during the day or night, basically Monday through Sunday, which was a barrier before because, most places are 8 to 5, and exactly is when our people are working. So they needed a number where they could call when they really can call. And our phone number has always been open to the community. And my mom is amazing answering those calls and giving people information.
That's wonderful. But all my listeners, again, listen to what just happened. So I said, how are you doing? And then she rattled off everything she's doing in the community, who she's helping, how she's helping. That's how these servants are, they're wired, right? So I'm getting out that you're doing okay. You're doing.
Oh, yes, because again, helping others keeps me going. You know, I am really someone that I feel that my purpose in life was to come and help others. And that makes me happy.
Oh, I love that. I believe that my purpose is to serve others. I believe that. I love that your mom was answering the phone. I love that. My mom was answering my phone. Oh, Lord. If I had my mom answer my phone. Oh, Lord. I love you, mama, though. But, oh, Lord. That's if y'all know my mama, too. So y'all, oh.
Yes, of course.
Okay. Mr. Brown, how about you? How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing well, thank you, Henry. And you know, the boss gave me she just gave me a doctorate, and I really appreciate that. However, I'm not a doctor, but I did play basketball in high school and a little bit in college, and I modeled my game after Julius Erving. I was a dunkaholic, and so I was called Doc. So I guess I'll take that. But as far as how am I doing? I think I caught COVID actually before the pandemic hit in February 2019. I came down with a really bad flu. But recovered, it was a flu, right? Took me out for a week, made me tired and all that kind of stuff, but I've recovered greatly. The stress of that whole time, the shutdown, we had layoff, just a whole bunch of employees. And, those of us who stayed, a lot of stress, there was so much stress. I know everybody was experiencing it and we were having to strategize. And I remember just feeling like, we had this foxhole mentality and, just trying to work through this divergence too of opinions from the managers that were still here. Some, were non-believers. Some of my folks come from more rural areas. Not to suggest they're all that way, but some of them were just like it's nothing. Others, to this day, I have my younger set who still continue to wear masks. But how am I doing? During that time, it's my responsibility to shield all of my employees from any kind of acid rain. And this was a tough one, right? Because, the acid rain was getting in. And so for me, it was just very important to try to remain calm. I was that duck on the water, right? It looked smooth as heck and just paddling like crazy underneath. But, as things have relaxed, I feel much better. My health is better. My mental health, I think more than anything, my physical health, I'm reasonably healthy, I suppose, for a guy my age. Yeah, overall, thank you for asking, Henry. We're doing well.
That's good to hear. And, I always say to my people that, Ho-Chunk is a nation. So like, there's people like you, there's a lot of people you're responsible for the hiring and keep things safe. And people like, it's a real thing. It's a nation, so that's a lot of pressure. So thanks for answering that question. Dr. Jenkins, how are you doing, sir?
Well, I just tell you, first of all, thank you to my colleagues for speaking to that, and thank you for asking the question. A lot of people around me know that I'm really about restorative, right? And the way you restore, you have to acknowledge. And that's like even why the land acknowledgement before we can move forward. But we have to also take time out to ask one another, how are you? Before we jump into the business. And so I really appreciate you taking time to do this. And me being a fifth generation child of a slave, and my grandmother was a sharecropper, and all we did, individuals with little means, but we had a lot because we had family, and we knew to not only take care of our immediate family, but we had to take care of the community. So as we were going through this, and when I was in Minnesota, the first district to close the school down because of COVID, and we were so ignorant at that point, we thought we'll close it down for 2 days, clean everything, get everybody back in. And even though I had been keeping up with John Hopkins, and even when COVID Bryant had passed, there was a little thing under that said, watch out for COVID. So February, I sent my first letter out to our families, just saying, watch out, but didn't really know. And from that moment, it seems like it's been one deep breath from 2 years ago. And because you try to go, then you had to go, because it was so many things coming at you so fast. And because I was the first one to close, people were calling me from around the country. Like I was the expert. And maybe I was looking smooth, like as Brother Brown said, but I'm like trying to figure this stuff out. And I found out quickly that you couldn't do it by yourself. So I started local, state, and national conversations about how we're going to get through this moment together. And then coming back to Wisconsin, and it was just been beautiful in terms of the support. And we have the best medical advisory team, I feel like, in the world. And I do sincerely mean that. And we've been following the science. This is a health thing. And I continue to tell everybody, I went to school, received my education, but it wasn't like doc. I wasn't in the medical side. I was in the educational side. But we had to combine and what we knew educationally and listening to the science and trying to interpret it and move forward. So we went to this thing, virtual learning, which was crisis learning. And to be really frank, it was like save the lives of our scholars so that they can go back. And that has an impact on you, right? Because we had Saeed, one of our students that we lost, during this time before we all came back. It was still during virtual time. And his mom said, tell him that this thing is real, right? When you talk to people, Dr. Jenkins, and so, but in the medical community, they say we can tolerate, what can we tolerate? And for me, that has been the part that's pushed me because I can't tolerate losing any students, any staff, or any community people. So yes, we've been a little bit stricter with the masks and following the science, but we're doing it because we know after we come out of this, we can get back to the learning. And students have been learning during this time. But we don't want to go back, in particular, our families who are, the COVID has impacted us a lot different than it has even other communities by the numbers. And so we have to take all the safety precautions to do the mitigations. So when you're trying to do that and make sure that people can return home every day safely, it wears on you a little bit. I'm okay with people perception about various things because nothing's more important to me right now to returning your child home, returning your parent home, returning your spouse home. And right now, things are easing up a little bit, even though the numbers are going back up a little bit. We've learned more now what to do in terms of the mitigation so we can get back to some of those activities that we know socially, emotionally, mentally impacted us by all of us closing down like we did when in isolation. I almost went crazy, to be frank, because I'm a people person. And I'm telling people, you can't do this, you can't gather. But I'm like, oh, geez, I'm having to tell myself because you're trying to model it. But it was rough. I'm just being honest with you. It has been tough, but it's been enjoyable as I've seen people come together, like people who you would have never thought would have come together during this time. So I'm excited right now about, like I said, we've been leaning forward. Now it's time for the momentum to build momentum. And that's what we're doing. So that's kind of where I am. Thank you. Sorry for that long answer. But
no,
I'm tired of it.
I'm laughing because, talk to leaders, and I hope you other two caught it. He got to how he felt all the way through all the other stuff. Right? All that. They got to how he's doing. And I'm telling you, leaders are built this way. Like they built to serve. They worry about everyone else. Then they get to themselves at the last. So out of all those wonderful things you said and all those things you finally at the end said, no, it was tough. That's and I get it, especially at the school district with people's kids. That's people don't play about their kids. So that's a tough job to have. So I'm going to start with you, Dan, on this question because we started with how you're doing. But let me talk about communities and how has COVID impacted communities? And I'll let you define community. I'll let you define how you community because I think there's people of color community. There's communities within communities. So I want you to define. I'm not going to have the arrogance to tell you what your community is, right? So from your perspective, how has COVID impacted your community over the past 2 years?
Well, first of all, and I probably a little housekeeping here. I'm here today speaking on behalf of Ho Chunk Gaming Madison as its manager. and not on behalf of the Ho-Chunk Nation as a whole. But I'm a tribal member, and I just want to, I'll take this from my perspective, and it's had a just like everybody else, it's had a very profound effect on people. We've lost, I don't know what the number is. I don't tally such things, but we've lost a lot of our people to this disease. So it's had a major impact. You have to realize too that a lot of what we do, culturally, it's very much togetherness, right? Whether it's a powwow, whether it's a traditional event, whether it's a Native American church service, it's all very close proximity. You're sharing food, you're literally sharing a spoon if you pass medicine back and with in a circle. It's had a profound effect on just the ability for that connectedness. Also, frankly, it was a wake-up call for the Ho-Chunk Nation. I'll set the citizenry aside just for a second to talk about the government end of it, and the fact that the gaming facilities are essentially our tax base, and that's what provides the funding for all of our programs to help our people. And it was a wake-up call, for the Ho-Chunk Nation. I hope it kind of exposed the fragility of our internal economy and that reliance on the gaming dollars. And so for me, I'm very hopeful going forward that we'll look at diversification, better investment, just sort of position ourselves better for the next go around, because I'm told there probably will be another go around. I hope not, but we can't wish it away. So we have to be prepared. So on the whole, it's been a high impact issue. Our health department did a marvelous job of staying in tune with what was going on nationally, statewide, locally. We have a tremendous health director who follows the science, thankfully. So we stayed on top of things. We were very careful, very conservative as far as our reopening and how we approached all of that. The mask, we had plexiglass between machines, plexiglass at points of contact through our gaming floor. Just we're exercise an abundance of caution. I think we were one of the last holdouts in terms of mask wearing. We quit wearing masks, I think, just 2 weeks ago, maybe 3 at the most. So again, overabundance, or maybe not over, but an abundance of caution, and rightfully so.
Yeah, I'm curious. How long were you guys closed? Did you guys close the casino at all?
Oh, yeah. We closed all 6 of them. I was the first to close. I believe it was March 19th, and then the rest of the facilities followed suit. Kind of funny, too. I again, following very closely what was going on locally. And Dr. Jenkins, when the schools closed, I followed suit immediately after that. I was like, man, if the schools are closing, we got to shut this down. I received a lot of criticism internally for that, because we're the primary revenue generator, but you do the responsible thing. So what was the question? I've got noise outside my office. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. No, the question was, did you guys close, and how long were you closed?
Yeah, we did. We closed March 19th and reopened, I believe it was late June or late May, I think it was. It was a year, right? Something like that. I mean, it was quite some time. Was it a year? I've got construction outside of my place and I'm getting distracted, but yes, we had to close for some time.
Wow. Well, I'm just asking because I know you are a big revenue generator, so that had to be a lot of pressure on you.
Yeah.
Wow. Dr. Jenkins, I'll come to you too and ask you about community and, how did COVID impact you? You said a little bit about it in your first answer, but how has it impacted your community, COVID, over the past couple of years?
Well, first of all, being here in Madison is different than being in some other places when you have individuals who really are astute when it comes to the science of what was happening around the disease. But what we did not, because you couldn't, it was a pandemic, it was historical. There were things that we didn't anticipate. There were things in our communities that we knew were not going well before the pandemic. Even though, like here in Madison was the fastest growing economy for one group, not everyone. It was exacerbated. We began to see when schools had to make certain decisions and initially going virtually, it impacted workers in terms of parents in terms of how they worked or how they couldn't work. Parents had to become co-teachers, and parents began to have a great appreciation for teachers during this time. We found out that we talk about learning styles, but we realized that some were not best suited to do what I call crisis learning in the beginning. We got better as a staff in teaching virtual learning, but it still was crisis. It was out of a crisis. We had talked about using technology in a way probably 10 years out. This accelerated us from a Wednesday, Thursday to a Monday, changing everything that we were doing. And some of the individual teachers had not even used technology, including the superintendent. Oh, that's me. Okay. The students had to show me, I was familiar with technology, but not all the different platforms. And so literally elementary students were talking to me through some of the Zooms early on of how to navigate some of the spaces we were in, because the younger students are digital natives. So it wasn't as much of an issue with students. It was the adults, us having to do additional training for adults to make sure that they could get on access. But I have to give it to our staff did a remarkable job. We thought about everything, and across the nation, I was so proud of education because we went bigger than just teaching content to caring about not just the child, but the whole family, the whole community. So we were serving 50,000 meals, a week to make sure that we were taking care of the families. We were looking at things of how students, as we grew, were impacted socio-emotionally and mentally, how the community was impacted by it. We were looking at our community as partners for real. We had talked about community partnerships, but now the community needed us and we needed the community. And the most important thing was try to keep everyone safe. And that's what we were doing. And then as we improve with our ability around the virtual learning, you begin to see some shift, but it was really highlighted, particularly Black and brown and poor children were being left behind in terms of some of the access, digital technology, the hot spots. You also begin to see in the community, because as I work with mayors and legislators, certain communities were not built for the digital technology access, that highway. So you had some students learning and some shut off. And so talking to the mayors, talking to the legislators, talking to the federal government, it was more important to do that. And it really exacerbated the fact that these disparities that we had and that we have, they were on Front Street right now. Certain things in terms of translation that we needed to do, we were not ready. So you even have another level of students who are impacted by that, staff trying to learn things. So, but at the end of the day, I think we have found some things from this whole pandemic that perhaps is going to stay with us as we move forward, because we did notice some students accelerated or gave staff different spaces. We could do things different. The old system we had wasn't working for 70% of the students anyway. And so now it's time to totally disrupt it. And that's why when I say the momentum, we've learned from the science piece of it that we can do the mitigation strategy, but we also learned that we have to be very intentional now about bringing all students in MMSD. We just made the largest investment in early literacy materials in over 20 years. And it was the most complex, most costly decision, because we made sure that our ELL students are going to have what they need in English and in Spanish. We made that it was sure that it was good for all students. Our African-American students, we've been talking about how they performed in MMSD over the years. We brought the science of reading to the forefront, and it's good for all students, not just a particular group of students. So, but I'm excited. Like I said, we've had to pivot like everyone else. And I think coming out of this, as we are now, businesses having those relationships, they're seeing education as partners, and we have to see business as partners, but we have to see our nonprofits too in the center of this work. And we have to bring our communities to the forefront. They can't be an afterthought. Madison can't be a city of two tales. Madison have to put everybody in there and consider it.
Yeah, it's interesting what you said too about families being taken care of, the whole families. As people know, I have 3 babies at home who run the household, and them being home was a challenge because you had to also help them virtually. And as you know, I think most of you know I have a son with Down syndrome, and so I have to actually sit down, be with him every day, me and my wife. And so I did to get I always respected teachers, but you did respect the craft a little different when you had to sit down and help teach and communicate every day. So I do like it. I think that's true. It brought our family closer, but it also we have a lot of respect for teachers. And I just can't imagine the stress that teachers had to go through over that time. I just prayers for all the teachers. Shout out to all the teachers who are going through that, because that is a blessing, the work that they do. And I learned that firsthand what I did was for a couple of years. So Dr. Patricia, what about you? How has this impacted your community? You have lots of, I know you handle a lot of different things. So, but how has it impacted your community?
I first want to say that I also respect and love teachers more than you know, particularly one that I have at home because my husband is a teacher. So we actually got impacted both ways because it was just so interesting how we had to set up offices for my kid, for my husband to teach, and for me to continue seeing patients at home and meetings. So we are very blessed by having a very big house, which is not for everyone, right? And I completely acknowledge that we are very gifted. It's a gift to be able to have a house where we could change that. But it was definitely so. Thank you, Dr. Jenkins, because I still think that it was the right thing to do. I know a lot of parents are still wondering, and to me, it was the right thing to do. And thank you for continuing protecting our kids and continuing the mask right now, because it's the only way we're going to keep on going. But yeah, so talking about our communities, I mean, we had to start with the fact that we were already with a lot of health disparities and a lot of social disparities even before COVID. And we were invisible, right? It's like for many of our communities, we have been invisible forever. And it was so obvious to us that work in the community, no organization came to us and say, "Ooh, you're going to be hit hard. What resources do you need to provide for your communities?" It was, again, inside. It was an inside work that we had to do, right? So immediately we knew we were going to be hit hard because we are essential workers, and we needed to continue going out. And our families couldn't be, waiting because they needed money to pay the rent and to feed their families. And they had to divide who will stay home with the kids to do the digital learning and who will go out, who will risk their life. Because at that point, we didn't know how this was going to go. And the people say, well, I risked my life before coming to this country. I'm willing to continue risking my life because I need to survive. So we couldn't even start talking about the medical part of things in a population that was already wounded until we started talking about the financial and social aspects of this pandemic. So one of the very first activities that we did as a community, we came all together, which is very nice that we are very well organized. And we started a fund to be able to provide for our families, so that if I, in my clinic, will say, you are sick, you should stay home, that I will also be able to provide the alternative of how they were going to provide for their families while they had to stay home. Initially, it was like 20 days, right? Or more, because we didn't know. So then we had to start teaching the rest of the community why it was important to provide for us, because if we will get infected and sick, we will infect other people. So it wasn't just about us again, it was about everyone, right? So we will get some responses to even some people saying, why would we provide for your community? You have a large community that are undocumented, that they shouldn't be here, resources that we're using for them. And we had to teach them that, again, it wasn't about us, even though it was really important that it was about everyone, right? So it wasn't not only working and helping our people, but almost going against the current with people talking about we need resources. We have people that are willing to work. We can do it, tireless, but without resources, we are not going to get anywhere. So I hope that this was a wake-up call for the community at large to understand that if we don't provide for everyone in this community, we are all in trouble, right? So I'm really hoping that by them noticing how hard our communities were hit, how the system had to provide for them, and that if we would have been better all before the pandemic, maybe this will have been easier for all of us, right? So it has been very disheartening just to see again where we start, where we are now, and how the community at large did not realize even before this, the health disparities and the social disparities that were there already.
I'm curious, Doctor. We did one of these town halls with some of our friends up in the Fox Valley, and one of our friends was from the Hmong population, the Hmong community. And she mentioned how there was a challenge of getting the word out to the Hmong community because people are coming to them say, just put a social media post up on a website thinking that would get to the Hmong population. And she was like, nope, that you have to go through our elders and our community, and that the structure of the community and communication process, how to best do that. And I'm listening to you, and you're talking about essential workers and undocumented folks. And was there a challenge of getting the word out in a way that was trustworthy, that people could trust?
Some, but the fact that with our organizations, we have been working with our community for the past almost 30 years, came in our favor. So, for example, Latino Health Council has been on existence for over 25 years. We have a radio program that we have been doing for 18 years. People know who we are. They trust us. They know that we do this from our heart. So the first time that we jump in the radio to talk to people about this, we had a big audience and we had a lot of calls. We were doing a 1-hour program. It ended up being almost a 3-hour program because people kept on calling and asking very good questions. And then we don't stay just obviously, I don't stay just at my clinic. I go out and I have a lot of allies with me, right? So I have a group of students, for example, that now we are going business to business, educating the business owners about why they need to protect their employees, why still wearing masks is important, why giving them vaccines is important. And like that, every time we find any other strategy that we can do in the community, we just go for it. But that is costly. And again, that's why we need resources, because it doesn't matter how much time I want to spend if I don't have money to do flyers, to do radio programs, to offer vaccines, then I'm not getting anywhere.
That's fascinating to me. What I heard you say is, well, we already had these communication lines set up. We already set this credibility up. We set this trust up already. We stay ready. We have to get ready because we stay ready for something like this. And I think that's important about community work is I've learned just through what we do here is that a lot of times people think that the messenger doesn't matter, but the messenger does matter. And having an infrastructure in place when something does happen is really important. So you're not spending all that time. Just think if you didn't have those communication lines set up, how long they're taking you to get that up, get that ready, and then have the messenger build that trust. So it's really important what you're doing. And I think hopefully it shows people how important the work is that you're doing, but it should also show people that stay ready, get these infrastructures together now. So when something happens, you have the communication tools to reach the community you need to reach, because you don't reach everyone the same way, right? So we know that just doing media, some people respond to an audio podcast, some respond to visual, some people respond to writing. It's the same thing in trying to get the word out. So I think that's important. The messenger matters and have that infrastructure together. So that's why you're the boss. This is why you're the boss. It comes back to you being the boss. Y'all thought we were playing. This is why she's the boss. She's the boss. Okay. There's this question that I want to make sure that I read this to you guys. I think it's a really good question. And the 2020 U.S. Census Bureau data shows that overall, Dane County grew about 16% and took place outside the city of Madison. While non-white Hispanics dropped to 78.6% in the county, Hispanics grew to 7.5% of the population, Asians to 6.3%, and the Black community dropped slightly to about 6.2%. And those who identified as Native American or Native Alaska remained at 0.5%. What implications do our systems need to consider as we see growth amongst our communities? And how important is it to make decisions on that data, and how do we better get data for our communities? And I'll start with you, Dr. The Boss, and let you start with this one.
Well, I think it's just very important to also realize that in this country, data is so important, right? You have to show the data, except when it came to science. So a lot of people that believe in data did not believe in science that has data, right? It has been just very interesting to me how all these years I had to show the data, except now when science was actually showing the data, right? For our population in the Latinx community, data is not even very valid because many of the people in our communities do not participate in the census because of cultural issues, language issues, legal issues. So always when we talk about how many of us are here, we always have to take that with a grain of salt. And I'm sure that is the same for many of the populations that we are talking about, because again, it's almost like the census was designed for a population that is not underserved population or underrepresented population, to be honest. But I think it's important that if we are going to go by the numbers, when you see these percentages in the actual number and the millions of people that we have nationwide now representing minorities of color is amazing to see. So again, people that talk about data like to talk about percentages, but when you talk about millions of people that require to have medical services, social services, it is going to be very important for the future to really keep that in mind. I remember many years ago, we were in a meeting and the mayor then, we brought her to one of our meetings in the Latinx community. And it was so disheartening that in our face, she said, "Oh, well, you are only like 4% of the population. Why is that we have to provide services for you?" And we all at the meeting were just like, what are you talking about, right? So again, numbers are relative, people are real. We are humans as any other humans, whether we are 50% of the population or we are 8% of the population. We need services. We pay taxes. So contrary to what a lot of people think, we pay a lot of taxes that many times we do not get back. We are part of the backbone of the economy in this country. And if we get sick, this society gets sick. Because if you don't have people that cleans, people that works in hospitals, people that work at restaurants, people that go to the fields and harvest the vegetables, then nobody can eat, right? Nobody can go to the doctor. So we need to start thinking that we are all human beings, regardless of where are we from, or what color we are, and start helping each other, but really helping each other, and not by being colorless. I think life is beautiful, particularly right now, the colors of nature are coming through. So we all have to acknowledge that the colors of nature are beautiful, but that we are all the same, meaning we all deserve to have the things that we need to thrive, for our families to be healthy, for our families to be healthy at every level, not only physically and mentally, but socially. And education is definitely one of the tools that we have in every one of our communities. And that's why I appreciate that Dr. Jenkins is talking about some of the things that he's planning to do. But I definitely want to keep him accountable that, our communities, everyone in our communities needs to thrive educationally, because that is where I feel that our communities are going to be able to get what they need.
I never would have thought that data would be used against us by saying there's only 4 point whatever as you said, the 4.4%. I can't. A mayor said that. You said? Did you say a mayor? And you said a female mayor.
We won't say no names.
I mean,
you can guess.
We've only had 2 female mayors I think of my time. So okay, so I'm just saying. But that's scary. That is scary that people want to push just the percentages, right? And the good thing though is, as you know, the Latino community is growing at such a rate that those numbers will never stay there. And at some point, it is going to be what it is. So that number, she can't stick to that. That line is going to change quickly, and it's changing quickly. But okay, Dan, same question to you.
Yeah. What was the question? I'm kidding. So I know it's like the implications. For me, it's a difficult thing to sort of, maybe distill or translate when it comes from the Ho-Chunk community. And so I think what I wanted to sort of piggyback on is the whole issue of education. And so, wherever we are, where it's societal, wherever we are, it always feels to me that it's just incredibly important for us to be very familiar with one another. These kind of settings for me are invaluable because, just from the standpoint of getting different perspectives, from different communities of color, to me, it's always super valuable. The Latinx community, some of those challenges, you're aware of them, but to hear them from a Latina, it's different. It's impactful. Dr. Jenkins, your perspective, and Henry, your perspective, putting this together in the first place to me is a big deal. Just to have this, more informal kind of, back and forth conversation, but for us too, we talk about this where we are as Ho-Chunk people, but how we all intersect, and how we, connect and collaborate. And so from an educational standpoint, us getting together in these instances or others, other settings where we can, share thoughts, share ideas, share challenges, share, our respective, perspectives on any given issue, whether it's COVID, business, unemployment, social justice, whatever the issues are. And Henry, you do a great job of covering all of these things for our respective communities of color. So, just in very general terms, the educational piece, that's a really high impact implication that we have got to keep pushing that boulder up the hill to get our at-large community, our white community, if you will, get them on, in tune, get them educated, get them, so that there's empathy, there's understanding, there's tolerance, there's all those sort of things. Whatever the circumstances are, whether it's COVID or, the economies, we're in an inflationary economy and so forth, but just so that there's concern. At the end of the day, I keep hearing this caring, that these leaders here today, the level of care that they express. And I think it's important that we just continue to push that needle with education so that we collectively care for one another. That will make our community that much better and that much more powerful going forward.
Dan, I'm listening to you and you talk about intersectionality and, communities come together. But I'm also hearing, and I never thought about it until I'm listening to you right now. Like you said, you're learning from Patricia and all that stuff. I'm learning from you, actually. So when people talk about D&I work and work with different communities, actually, Ho-Chunk has been doing that forever. Because think about I'm listening to you because the people you serve who come to your casino are all walks of life. I mean, the wealthy, the poor, black, white, you name it. So you've been doing D&I work and bringing communities together for a long time. Think about it. I'm listening to you and I'm like, oh, he's talking about D&I work, really? But
pretty much, Henry, and the other part too, just for my other panel members, maybe they know or don't know the level of. I talked about it earlier. I just mentioned that we've kind of lived inwardly, and we're only just now starting to reach out, and all these gestures of land acknowledgements and so forth have been, they're so valuable. but we're also this generation right now. The one ahead of me was so pained and was so close to some really bad federal policy. You know, the mission schools where my mother went to, the removals, the you name it. You know, the deculturalization efforts. All of these things had such an impact, and they impact someone like myself a little less. I mean, I still feel the pain, and I still suffer my own historic trauma, as so many of the generation of mine, and you know, and that after myself. But the whole idea is, you know, we have to get out, Henry, and you know that, you know, 8 years ago, we were pretty invisible, and I'm not patting myself on the back, but by God, it was so important for us to get out and become a real part of this community, not write a check, hand it to an organization, walk away, but get involved. And one of my first missions really was to really start connecting with the communities of color, figuring that, you know, we all share some pretty similar history as far as oppression and some really bad things happening to us. We can laugh about them, but we know it's serious business, and we always going to need to come together. And hopefully, you know, the entire community will come together.
Yeah, well, for sure, Dan. I know for a fact that you really got into the community and really, you know, got out and make sure that whole chunk was represented. And I'll come back to come to you, Dr. Dean, for the same question. But I will say what you just said to me, doing all these panels all these years, the one thing I learned from communities of color is we all have pain, and it's come from different ways. But it's like you could, if I closed my eyes and didn't know who I was talking to, you could hear the story, and you're like, oh, is that the Black community? Like, I'm listening to what you just said, Dan, about your elders. I'm thinking to myself, I thought about my mom. So my mom, like, she grew up down south in Alabama, right? The Klan kicked in her door when she was young, looking for a Black guy that they thought dated some white girl. Like, my dad left the South at 18 because they were lynching Black folks in Mississippi. So his big brother came and got him to about the South. So you're saying that to me, and I'm hearing them, I'm thinking those things, but we're talking about two different communities, right? Like, it's just same thing. It's just interesting how pain, you know, it just doesn't matter what community, pain is pain.
Yeah.
Dr. Jenkins, sir, do you want to answer the question? I'm sorry if you still remember the question.
Well, this is actually one of the questions that really resonated with me for two things. First of all, earlier when I mentioned Chief Seattle, I wanted to just share it with you because this is really dear to me when he said, humankind has not woven the web of life. We are but one thread within it. Whatever we do to the web, we do to ourselves. All things are bound together. All things connect. Whatever we do to the web, we do to ourselves. And this is from Chief Seattle, right? And when I think about it, and I think about America, and when you say explaining the numbers, it's colonization, right? And in order to do colonization, we had to make indigenous people. The reason I bring that so sincere, you had to make them invisible. And the laws supported this. And James Baldwin says that as much as we talk about America, we love America's greatest country on earth, right? But we can't forget America's democracy is tied directly to slavery that benefited the world. So when you think about indigenous, you think about that in America too, were the immigrants that they forget. Now, based on your pigmentation of your skin color, you're an immigrant. But where did America come from? You know, they weren't born here. So I just think, so when we look at numbers like this, we have to flip the numbers. The ones who are the most can do the most. So you start out with 0.5. It should be a pyramid. Flip the numbers up top. And then the ones at the bottom should be the base. And understand what you do to someone else, you do to yourself. So these numbers, and when we made this decision to make this large investment in early literacy, yes, this is the first time in Madison, and I can go back to 93 when I was here and say Madison's always had arguments with reading wars, because they were trying to protect the ones at the bottom of the pyramid, now 78%, and not so concerned about the ones the further you go up. So look at the numbers there. These are not my numbers. These are the numbers you gave me. Colonization, which is totally white supremacist, is based in numbers. And you can use them for good and you can use them for bad. And it wants to keep us decoupling, not joining together. But we should look at these numbers and say, this is more the reason that we should realize that human connectivity is important. The pandemic humbled us. And no matter your wealth or anything else, you had to say, that's a human being. And I've got to be about the human race. And I'm not saying to erase, our differences. I'm not Black because that's made up, in the 15th, 16th century. I am who I am of another spirit, but I'm Blacker than anybody that you know. So don't even try to begin to think that I'm not. Okay, so I look at these numbers and I get a sense of urgency to say what we're doing in MMSD, what I'm looking at as a person. I'm listening to you all. It's time we come together as human beings and take over and move it forward for everyone's good. The health piece that Dr. Tellez talked about, and you heard all of her, all of our ancestors probably talked the same way because and now we're all about community. We have to get more people saying that the community is where it starts. It's not where it ends. Communities should be pouring into schools, pouring into other families, taking care of the whole family, and everything will turn out okay. Yeah, I'm looking at these numbers, but to me, I have to read. I'm sorry, I may be dyslexic or whatever, but I'm having to look at these numbers and read them backwards. I do them in the inverse.
That's powerful. I love that pyramid, that image. That's powerful. That's a powerful statement. So this is why I love doing these things. I learned so much. Okay, so we can keep going on. This is going to be the last question. I've already kept you guys so much already. Last question, and I have so many other questions I want to ask. Thank you guys. This is just a wonderful panel. Last question, and so then I'll let you go. And I'm trying to think who I want to start with here. I got to start with the boss. I'm sorry, gentlemen. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, gentlemen.
We were going to wait to correct you and say the boss must go first. That's why we call her boss lady. Dr. Right. Boss lady.
Come on, guys. Be nice.
We say with all due respect. We're not making fun. We say with respect and with all the things you're doing. So hope you see that. Hope you hear that in our voices here. Okay, so question is, how do your communities begin to prepare for the workplace of the future? And in what ways do we need to make our education and training systems more agile and responsive to our future work? And how does inclusion and equity fit into this? And I'll start with you, Doctor.
That's a question that we can spend hours talking about, right? So it's hard for the last question, but what I can tell you is that Latinx people are such a hardworking people. I have such a respect for people in our communities. I don't know how they can do the things that they do. From being in the sunlight, picking up our cucumbers so that we can enjoy them to many other things that they have to sacrifice for their families. And they are eager to learn. So for people that think that we come here and we want to make our life miserable by not learning English and not going to school and not progressing, let me tell you, that is not true. I have seen what is happening with Academia Latina, with Baltasar. I'm so grateful for that place. They are giving our families a way to do that, a way to learn English, a way to learn a skill so that they can move up in the ladder. Why? Because right now, when you see the numbers again, you can see that, they are not unemployed. They are really good. Well, no, we are not. We have 3 jobs many times because the payment is so low that we cannot just hold one job that will pay well for our community. So what happens that if we move up in the ladder, you have to pay us better, right? So if I'm bilingual, you should be paying me better, but the system is not, right? If I'm providing for a community that is in such a need, maybe I need to be compensated for that. So people are really choosing to educate their kids, and schools are very, very important for our communities. And they are choosing to educate themselves so that they can move up a little bit on the ladder so that they can have better income and a better life. So we need to support these programs that are providing for these families to be able to move up in the ladder. So I'm glad to see that there was a little bit of money that the government put on Academia Latina, but let me tell the governor, we need more. We need more in education. We need more for health so that families can be healthy and be able to go to school and be able to acquire the skills that they can use in the future to help not only themselves, but our communities. Again, if we win, everybody wins. So we are so ready to do that. We are already providing these educational opportunities at several of the community organizations, Centro Hispano, Academia Latina, and we're providing other health services and social services to other outlets that we have in the community. But without resources, we cannot do it. So we really need more resources to be able to do it.
Thank you so much for that. It's wonderful, wonderful stuff. Community here. We'll go with you, Dan.
I know we're running a little short here on time, but just real quick, I think people just absolutely, companies, leadership, put your money where your mouth is. This community does a lot of talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, and that sort of thing. It's just a matter of actually executing. I'm real proud of the fact that I was on the hiring committee for MadRep CEO. Jason Fields. In fact, I remember coming down to just a few candidates, and I challenged the rest of the committee. And I said, let's put our money where our mouth is. We're talking to these similarly, qualified individuals, and I just thought there's no way we're going to pass this up. Let's make a statement as one of the leading nonprofits in this community. Let's make a statement. Let's hire Jason. And let's help him succeed. Let's do everything we can so that, he's successful, so Madrep's successful, so the economic engine in this, the economic diversification and development in this community is successful. And that's something to me that the Madison, we can step back sometimes and be critical because of the mouth, the lip service that community gives, but we also have to give credit where credit's due, right? We have now we have a Black chief of police. We have a Black sheriff, Dr. Jenkins. These are leaders. To me, that's a statement. And so I think, what I see going forward is continue to moving that needle, right? And so our young people of color can look up and say, I could be that one day. I think that's a huge statement. And I think that's something, going forward that we just need to, coalesce around that concept of putting your money where your mouth is and making those good decisions, for the betterment of the community. We know from an economic development standpoint that, when communities of color are doing well, it's going to lift the rest of the entire community up and being successful. So I think collectively we continue this messaging and continue to, impart the influence that's necessary to assure that, this community is genuinely moving in that direction.
Dan, I want to say what you just said. I think it's important. We talked about tokenism earlier. And sometimes people have to be on board, the directors of everything in Madison, to be that token, that one person. But what I heard you say is, no, I'm on this board, on this hiring committee, but I'm going to speak up for what's right for the community and make sure we're backing up what we're saying we're going to do. And I hope other leaders of color hear that. When you might be the one or few on any board, any nonprofit, we have like 4,300 in this county, like that you are willing to speak up and not just be a token, be a placeholder, that you're willing to speak up and say, hey, no, these are right things to do. Because Jason's such a great guy, Milwaukee guy, love Jason, man of faith. Jason's a wonderful brother, man. So thank you for that, Dan. There's a lot of things people can learn from that. Dr. Jenkins, we'll end with you, sir, on this question.
Yeah, I think this is a powerful question. Not much time to even really speak to it like we need to, but the reality, I think the things that were said are all true too, but the reality of, actually doing it versus saying it, and we start thinking about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I've been I'm back to Madison. I'm not new to Madison. I've seen Madison do tokenism. Individuals get in roles, but are they really supported? When you start talking about Dr. Barnes, and I say Dr. Barnes, people say, well, why are you calling the chief of police? I say he's Dr. Barnes. You brought him here with the skills and expertise. Is he allowed to do the job? He doesn't have to agree with you, but is he allowed to do the job? He and I intellectually disagree, but we find things we agree on as well. I think the names that just came up, they were all men. Where are the women at the table for real? Where are the individuals? They don't have to outwardly, they could be whoever they are, LGBTQIA. Where are they at the table for real in the head positions? How are we looking at how we bring in different people to the table? In the district, I have a challenge right now. I'm looking at how do I bring other individuals. We don't mention Hmong because say Hmong is like the fourth largest group, but now they've moved up too. But do we have to look at percentages to say that we need this percentage? Are we going to have a quota system? Are we going to really break the barriers and say talent will arrive? And we have to be intentional. And so my hopes is that someday that our children, they make a decision to follow their passion. And when you're following your passion, you may need a degree, you may not need a degree. Why can't they own the company? Why can't they be entrepreneurs? Why can't they go from welding to engineering? Why can't they be the medical doctor to break through this whole thing with COVID? I think we need to get out of the way of what we learned during pandemic. Our scholars are resilient. Our community is resilient. We could be a world leader if we see individuals as human beings, stop locking ourselves into thinking that everyone must go get a college degree and owe $300,000. Okay, because a degree with debt is not a good degree. I don't care who you are, and my colleagues push back on me and say, Jenkins, why do you say that? I think we need to find ways to work with our legislators so that they understand the importance of education, so we don't see another 0 and 0 from the Joint Finance Committee for protecting our most prized investment, that meaning our children. We don't mind paying taxes. We don't mind doing these things, but let's make sure we invest. I'm a public school educator today, tomorrow, and forever. But I do think everyone has a right to a high quality education. And once they get that education, be it K through 12 or be it all the way up through like doctor here, we need to give them also the opportunity to flourish as a human being.
Wow, it's powerful stuff from all three of you. I am so honored that you all decided to join us and said yes. And I hope people hear the talent we have in our community. We have so much talent for small size that we are. The talent here is unbelievable. And the theme throughout everyone who said is community serving, community serving, community serving was the theme throughout everything you all said. So thank you, Dr. Jenkins, for joining us and leaning forward with us. And we appreciate for everything you're doing. I'm going to call you Dr. J. Brown. Thank you, sir.
The Dunkathon.
The Dunk Master Ho Chunk. Thank you, sir. Thank you for joining us. And Dr. Patricia, thank you, boss lady. We thank you. We honor you. Thank you for all that you're doing for our community. You just ooze helping and serving people. It's just like it comes from your family. I know it's part of your DNA and your family, so I know you get it from your mama. I get it. But thank you for joining us, and hopefully we'll see you next time forever. And thank you for joining us.
This is 365 Media.